Hi, I'm Rob Pincus, and I'm a founding board member of Walk the Talk America, and I'm a career firearms instructor. I left full-time law enforcement in 2001 to teach people how to be better prepared to defend themselves or others with a firearm if they need to. Chances are that's what you're interested in doing as well if you're listening to this video. This video is going to talk about your responsibility and your students' eventually responsibility to prevent unauthorized access to their firearms. As I said, the number one thing I've done in my adult life is help people be better prepared to defend themselves with a firearm when they need to. And whether that's an armed professional, to the highest levels, military people that we have in our country, law enforcement all around the world, and people just like you. And of course, that means having access to our guns, right? But the number one responsibility that I think we have as firearms owners is to prevent unauthorized access to our guns. And that may surprise you that I say it's number one, but let me tell you who I think shouldn't have access to our guns. And number one is people who aren't educated in the appropriate and responsible use of firearms. And that means the new gun owner as well. So a first-time gun owner goes out and buys a gun, and until they bump into somebody like you or somebody like the instructor that's running your class, someone who can educate them. Maybe it's just a friend, maybe it's a family member, but hopefully it's a professional educator who can help them understand how to use the gun responsibly, appropriately. And again, that could be a hunting gun, could be a recreation gun, could be a competition gun, or in the most important cases, it's that defensive gun. And that's going to include how to access the gun quickly, but it should also include, and I think this is what we're talking about right now, it should include the advice, the guidance, the best practices to prevent unauthorized access. And that means keeping the gun out of the hands of people who don't know how to use it. Obviously, keeping the guns out of the hands of people who intend to use it harmfully, criminals, people with malicious intent. Keeping the guns out of the hands of someone who isn't mentally or emotionally capable of understanding the ramifications of gun use or gun negligence or gun misuse. And that could be temporary, right? That could include somebody maybe who's been drinking. Personally, I don't carry firearms. If I'm having one drink with dinner, my gun's locked up. I don't have people over for a wine tasting or a whiskey tasting, and also do show and tell with guns. So we keep the guns and the alcohol separate, maybe other recreational drugs or prescription drugs that alter the way that you think or perceive the world. And then, of course, there's people who may be mentally or emotionally impaired that don't understand the negative potential outcomes involving the use of firearms. We want to make sure they aren't touching the guns. Also, and the fourth is people who are not physically or intellectually capable of operating the gun safely. And that means they may not understand it. They may be too young. They might be physically strong enough. You may remember a handful of 5-10 years ago, a would-be instructor was guiding machine gun experiences and gave an 8-year-old girl a fully automatic submachine gun or personal defense weapon, and gave it to her with apparently a fully loaded magazine. She pulled the trigger, recoil took over the control of the gun. She lost control of the gun, and actually that instructor guide in that moment lost his life. The tragedy all around obviously for him, his family, this poor girl and her family, and the entire firearms community, because that gun was put in the hands of someone who wasn't physically capable of using it. And we would argue wasn't actually educated in the proper and responsible use of that firearm either. So as an instructor, this is an incredibly important thing. We talk a lot about trauma mitigation as well. If you don't ask your students, hey, do you have kids in the house? How are you maintaining access control? And then that student of yours has a tragedy occur inside of their home involving one of their children. Maybe the child shoots somebody else, child shoots themselves with a gun that should have been locked up, should have had controlled access. That can haunt you. And I think all of us in the firearms industry, we know those stories and we know about those things. So I really want you to take ownership of this. It's something that I think is incredibly important. It's not just about hitting the target. It's not just about getting that reload done. It's not about quickly getting the gun into your hand and getting it out of the holster. It's also about making sure that when you're not in the immediate control, when you're not supervising the gun, when you're not able to make sure that no one's going to get to this gun unless they fight me to get to it, that we know that this gun isn't going to fall into the wrong hands, any of those 4 categories I talked about. So what are we going to do? Well, gun inside the holster is one thing, right? That's kind of going to prevent some level of unauthorized use, but obviously the gun's very accessible. And again, as I said, with a defensive gun, we want it to be accessible very quickly. But when I'm not using it for defense, that's when we're not carrying it for defense, I should say. That's when we're going to talk about either storage or staging. And it's important to differentiate between the two. Now, this is an Firearms PD-10. I am one of the owners of the company, and I'm the designer of this gun. And at Avidity Arms, I'm stepping off camera here for just a second to grab this manual. Obviously, we have manuals that ship out with all the guns, and I think this is the only manual in the industry. All the manuals you've seen, maybe the ones you haven't read with the guns you bought, they all talk about storing ammunition and guns separately when not in use. Well, this manual also has that line in there, but we differentiate between storage and staging. Right? If I want this firearm to be ready so that I can use it to defend myself or my family in my home, just because I'm not wearing it doesn't mean I'm not using it. Staging a gun is a use of the gun, and that might mean that the gun is obviously staged with ammunition. Now, it may be only in the magazine and not in the chamber. The magazine may be next to it. But what I want to do is still control access. So as a defensive firearms instructor, I've had to really make sure that our students know there are ways to do that. Something like this quick access safe, for example, right? Great way to do that. Gives you a biometric, gives you a key code, punch code you can put in there. There's a hard key backup. You can get into this very, very quickly and easily. And this is something that we should be advocating for. And of course, advocating that our students train with it, practice getting the gun out under some kind of stress. There are smaller versions, right? This version here, same company, has a keypad, but no biometric. There are mechanical versions, which have mechanical locks that don't require any batteries or charging or anything like that, right? We can have this kind of a situation here where once this is locked, I mechanically push in my code, turn that, and I get access to the firearms that are within. Now we could do a whole video just on staging and home defense concepts, and you can take a look at my website, personaldefensenetwork.com. Maybe you have some things that you advise to your students, other people in the room. Have a discussion about this. Talk about staging, because staging is different from storage. Now, when we get into these bigger safes, obviously we're talking about access control also. This is a pretty unique safe. This has a storage compartment down below. It also has a quick access style safe compartment here with a keypad up here that we can put the firearm into. So that's kind of a combo safe. If nothing else, obviously, the firearms that we buy, they come in cases, and those cases, many of them, allow for just a simple padlock to be put on there. We talk about preventing unauthorized use as much as unauthorized access. Obviously, there's people in your home, they have access to the gun. We want to make sure that we're always clear that we don't expect that this is impregnable as a plastic case with a padlock on it. All of our guns come with locks, right? It's a federal requirement. Not a fan of federal requirements at all, not a fan of storage requirements for that matter. I'm a fan of people taking the responsibility to meet the obligation that I do think we all have to prevent access and or use by unauthorized persons. So something like as simple as a cable lock that came for free with the gun, that could be an option. And then of course, outside of the gun case, if we just ship guns out, for example, at Avidity in a cardboard box, not a plastic case, a nicer case like this. So you might want to buy a plastic case that will allow you to put a padlock on there as well for your firearm and firearms. And then you only need one set of padlocks. You don't need a padlock for every one of your gun cases. Something like this, the latest, greatest, kind of all the bells and whistles, Wi-Fi connected. It'll give you a tamper alerts. It's got battery, obviously, power. We can plug it into the wall. We've got the biometric. We've got punch codes. We've got hard key. A lot of different things you can do with this. And of course, this gives you quick access to a long gun. So not only handguns are something that we all carry and stage for personal defense, but a lot of us also stage long guns, stage ARs or maybe a shotgun, something like that, PDW, lever action, whatever it may be. Well, now you can put that into this rifle-sized type safe. What if you can't afford the big safe? I get it, right? These things are not cheap, but you've got the AR. Well, there's other devices out there that are available as well that will allow you to prevent unauthorized use, if not unauthorized access, right? So we have this gun in our home, which is not in a safe. It is going to be staged for defensive use. You can see this is set up here for a whole bunch of things we could do with this gun, the way it's set up with a bipod and variable optic, backup optic, we got a tourniquet on there, all this stuff. But ultimately, if this were the gun that I was staging for home defense, I could use a device like this, insert it into the magwell, turn the key, remove the key, and this is going to give me a secure gun. So this is now locked in there. This actually meets California standards. It may just look like a hunk of plastic, but it's really not impossible, but it's hard to get out of there. I mentioned earlier, we don't think these plastic cases or these locks are, not capable of being defeated. If you give someone enough time and access to your guns, regardless of how you have them stored or staged, someone could obviously find a way to get this out of there. Now, when you go to get this out of there, you put the key in, you turn it, and then you just simply hit the magazine release, and that's going to eject that device. There are a lot of other devices out there that are available. I'll show you this one. This is kind of one of the newest things on the market in terms of securing an AR from unauthorized use. And this is from a company called Advon. And this simply replaces the grip, standard grip that you would have on any AR. And it gives you a key lock where now, because you don't have the safe, you have a separate key. And this actually locks the gun so that the selector switch cannot be manipulated. There's also some devices out there now for handguns as well. A company called GoSafe has a device that replaces a magazine in a Glock type firearm. And what it does is it actually, not only is it a lock, but it's also a magazine. So you can have a loaded magazine in your gun and deactivate the gun. Now, I get it. People are probably cringing and saying, I don't like the idea of having a key and I have to go get the key and I have to unlock the gun and that slows me down. You know, if you go back and look at some of the things I've written or said or shared in TV shows or articles or interviews, I'm not a big fan of that two-step process either. One of the things that I get a lot from people is, look, Rob, Second Amendment, government shouldn't be telling me what to do. You shouldn't tell me what to do. I have this gun so I can protect myself, my family. I don't want to make it any harder to get to it than it needs to be. I get it. All right. And I'm not talking about mandates and I'm not talking about legal issues here. What I'm talking about is, I think, a moral, ethical responsibility that we have. You know, why do we own these guns? We own these guns to be safer. We own these guns to be able to protect people. And I think sometimes that means we need to remember that we need to protect people from themselves. Sometimes, you know, again, when it comes to like the drinking or maybe a temporary mental health issue that's being dealt with, that means also removing ourselves from immediate access to guns, making sure that we take that extra step to deter the potential worst case scenario negative outcomes from being possible with our firearms, our family, our friends, people that are in our home, people that are contractors that are working there. You know, in our workplace, we have other people. I'm at the factory right now for Avidity Arms. There's some people in here are obviously lifelong gun owners and very, very skilled in the use of guns and very knowledgeable about firearms. There's other people in here that don't own a gun, maybe have never even shot a gun, but they work at a gun factory. Doesn't mean I'd want them necessarily picking up a completely assembled gun, even though they're really good at making some of the parts that go into it. Somewhere in this room, there's an instructor who's playing this video for you and letting you know why these things are incredibly important, not just to me and Personal Defense Network and Walk the Talk America, but to you and to the entire gun owning community. Thanks to them, wherever they are, wherever he or she may be. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to anyone who's willing to listen to this information about meeting firearms owners' number one responsibility, preventing unauthorized access and use.